Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hey, and welcome to this week's edition of Inside Scoop. I am Marcus Simon. I'm your host this week. And I am back from a recently completed legislative session. And I'm going to be joined today by two of my colleagues for four segments, but in two different parts. We're going to start out with my colleague Vivian Watts, who is the Dean of the Fairfax County and really the General Assembly. She's served since before anyone else. I don't think she has number one in seniority, but she's been doing this longer than anybody. She did take a brief stint to be Secretary of Transportation and Public Safety under the Blouses administration. But she and I are going to kick things off, and then I'll be joined by our colleague from the Senate, Senator Saddam Salim, who is one of the newest members of the Senate. So we're going to get a couple of different perspectives for a variety of reasons, some from Vivian and some from Saddam. But first, we've got Vivian Watts. And Vivian, why don't you tell us a little bit about your district, where you represent here in Fairfax, and how long you've been doing this?
District is 2/3 inside the Beltway. It's virtually all of the Annandale zip code and the Alexandria 312 that's inside Fairfax County, and then some bits and pieces around Lanconia, Bryn Mawr, Annandale, out to the community college campus.
Gotcha. This is your new district. You've had like, what, 4 or 5 different districts since you started?
At least. This one's the closest to home that I've had in a long time. But yeah, I've been spread out all over the place and have represented parts of this district, almost all of it at one time or another. So I have a heritage as far as how things have developed in the district.
All right, well, very good. Well, let's jump right into it because we're coming off, like I said, the legislative session. We just finished our short session in Virginia. We have, well, our even shorter session, right? Our long session is only 60 days, and this is our 45-day session. Since we don't do a brand new budget, I guess the thought is we don't need quite as much time. But what was your biggest accomplishment this session? What would you say, if you had one thing to report out on, you wanted to make sure everybody knew about, what would it be?
Well, I continue to be really focused on taxes. I know that sounds odd, third rail of politics, generally you just leave it alone, but I started out, before you went into my history, it was 15 years of a lot of work, getting my kids through school. How are we going to fund this? 15 years of, women didn't run for office, and I'm a nerd at heart. I'm a night person, just put me in front of the budget, I'm happy. So I got a real grounding in all of the issues that are still so much with us, as far as real estate taxes, the breadth of taxes, people who live in the district versus who come into Fairfax, et cetera. So bringing all that to the state level, the numbers person at heart, a lot with funding formulas, transportation, education. So now I'm just as happy as could be because I'm chair of the House Finance Committee, and that is the tax writing committee.
Better you than me, by the way. That's great. I did law school because I was told there'd be no math, so I'm glad to have somebody like you who enjoys that, running the finance committee.
Hey, I went off to University of Richmond Law School, and there were a number of students who were genuinely interested in taxes, and I'm thinking, life's good. This is because it is extremely complex. It's one of the fattest volumes, both of the federal code and of the state code. There's a lot of intricacies. I'm continuing to learn every day about how things play out. Sometimes it looks good on initial look, and then you see how the tentacles fit into something else. So it's a constant challenge. Now back to this session, because we are in a situation of having a surplus, we're sort of in an odd situation. So we were able to deliver a good, solid tax cut of over $1 billion.
Wow.
Now, most of that goes directly to dealing with the inflation that hit over the last 3 or 4 years, because the last time that we had increased, now here we come with some technical, the standard deduction.
Sure.
The standard deduction says that you don't pay any taxes below the level of the standard deduction. So if you don't raise that standard deduction, inflation means that you're paying taxes when this money doesn't mean what it used to. The federal government indexes theirs. In other words, they change that standard deduction every year. Virginia, because we have to balance our budget in part, we don't index.
So that gives us some flexibility, right? It gives us a little bit of
Well, it's not only flexibility, but really responsibility,
right,
because you cannot go in the red. So if you automatically index, you got some problems. But what we were able to do this session, was to address the serious inflation that we had, because now I'm getting into more details, but once the feds made the tax changes in 2017, that really put a lot of emphasis on the standard deduction. I've read somewhere that about 90% of the taxpayers file standard deduction in Virginia because you don't have enough income to itemize. The way the rules have changed. So when we don't stay in line with inflation with the standard deduction, we're really bleeding taxpayers by taxing that inflation-driven income of them. So by raising the standard deduction, we got it back up, but we had to look at the situation. So it's been about 4 years, a lot of accumulative. So shorthanding it, out of the $1 billion, about $900 million plus is going to go for a one-time rebate. $200 to individuals, $400 to couples. That directly directs inflation. Right now, we've had these last couple of years, we've brought it under control. This is sort of makeup, if you will.
Oh, very good.
And that's where the bulk of the money goes.
Well, that's something to be excited about. An accomplishment is essentially that a democratically controlled House of Delegates and Senate, which we're often accused of being tax and spend liberals, we actually delivered $1 billion in tax cuts to
and
Virginians.
Delivered it across the board to all taxpayers.
In the fairest way possible.
And the best way possible, and did put in about $90 million into some indexing so that that's a permanent change. I'd like to be able to always do that, but at least on a permanent basis, we're trying to address inflation.
Got it. Got it. Well, I guess my next question, Governor, was what was your signature issue? I think that the taxes is
obviously you get me going, right?
Yeah. So tell me about that. So again, you're one of the most senior members, right? We had an exciting session. A lot's changed, right? We had a lot of new members come in. Tell me a little bit about what was different this session. Compare this, maybe, I don't know, all the way back to your first, but how is your most recent session different than what it was like when you first got to Richmond?
Well, Marcus, I have to give you two different answers. One, just in case you hadn't noticed, I'm a girl.
Yes.
Yeah. And for the longest time, in fact, until 2019, basically we never had in a 100-member House more than 19 women. So there were things that I was very concerned about, very much thought needed to be addressed. But I knew in saying them to 9 out of 10 men, it wasn't going to go anywhere.
Right.
How much that has changed. We now have full, robust life being represented on the floor of young family members, both male and female, but taking on the full responsibility of care as well as a lot of solid professional credentials that I have been extremely impressed with. So for some of these members who came in just this term, now they're in their second year, I've become more impressed. It's in good hands. There are people who are knowledgeable, articulate. Now, my challenge as a longtime member, and I said this to myself a while back, if you're going to stay in, Vivian, you got to stay up to date, because otherwise you're just an old curmudgeon. And since I'm a nerd, I enjoy staying up to date, and that means I'm listening to the new members, trying to see where they want to go, and because of my history in the issue, help guide them around some basic points that might not have been brought to them yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. We had some firsts that happened this session too. I think we had, for the first time, we had a member who gave birth in the middle of session and went out for a couple weeks for full maternity leave, and then she was voting remotely from home.
Yes, and following every vote, because the baby was born just at one of the most intense times of voting, and I never saw a hesitancy on her part at all.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the cutest moments I think of session was she was voting, verbally, so she wasn't there able to press the button, and we heard the baby in the background. Remember that? There's a little cute.
Right.
And I don't know what the bill was or anything, but I think everybody remembered what a cute sound we just got out of Destiny Olivia Bowling.
Yes.
For those of you watching, you were wondering who we're talking about. And she had a baby right around crossover. I think maybe the day after crossover, the baby was born.
And as far as the breadth of life experience, all of us who've been through it, that's something that never leaves you. So that parent in you, that nursing mother in you is always there. And so this is where the blend of new members and members with a longer life experience, I think, is working extremely well.
All right. So we talked a little bit about what positive things you have and your biggest accomplishment. Did you have a disappointment? Was there a bill that you've been working on or something you think we've been working on that you hope might make more progress this year but didn't quite make it across the finish line?
I'm going to put mental health up there. Now, first and foremost, one of our challenges in mental health, as it is in most healthcare fields, is having professional people, having the staff that we need. Because there's a number of reasons why mental health is now much more front burner than it was for a long, long time. Typically, it was something you kept away from. Now I think there's a much greater realization that everybody at some point has something happen to them they're going to need some help dealing with, some professional help, besides all of the things that make up the human body and the way in which our brain works and synapses and so on, that may produce mental health that has to be issues that have to be constantly dealt with, as well as, of course, all of what I always shorthand DDID, the disabled and the intellectually disabled. So that you're always dealing with an incredible combination of people who need help. So one of my biggest disappointments is trying to work on the interface of when someone is in mental health crisis and law enforcement gets involved. How do we wend our way through what has to be done during crisis to bring the person into a stable situation, but then not saddle them with a felony charge because they touched the officer, or not have the right kind of services available, because particularly when I'm talking about the intellectually and developmentally disabled, the neurologically challenged, and that's Alzheimer's to autism, et cetera, those individuals may not have a good placement of where they need to go, because we've emphasized only the state mental health hospitals that will be dealing with schizophrenia and other psychosis and depression, et cetera. Yeah. So that's my disappointment, that we still have a long way to go, both in funding but also within what the law recognizes as appropriate.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we just spent this segment went by very quickly. We only hit a couple of topics. When we come back, though, we're going to try something new. I've got a game show idea for you.
All right.
Friends of the NPR show, Wait, Don't Tell Me, will recognize some of this. But we'll be back with Vivian. We're going to do a rapid-fire series of topics on things that you probably want to hear about. So we'll be back right after this.
Old man Hennessy's window.
Correction, dude. You broke. I just threw the ball.
This is really bad. What are we gonna do?
We? Go to the door and ask for the ball back.
Are you serious?
It's my ball, Myrtlebeck.
I'm so dead. I'd run away.
Yeah, to Uruguay.
Kiss your life goodbye. Sorry.
Let's go. See ya. Remember me and your well.
Nice one. Some friends you are. Hi. Tell him it was an accident. And we can fix the window. Come on. I'll come with you.
Loyalty. Pass it on.
You go first.
A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about a freak-out fight. Nothing very nice on a homely splash. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Awkward. I'm the awkward silence. You try to avoid me, then there I am again.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
Like Kelly here's about to demonstrate.
You haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Today, Delegate Marcus Simon, joined by my first guest of two, Delegate Vivian Watts. I told you before the break we were going to come back and we're going to play something of a game show. So Vivian,
Okay.
you are the former Secretary of Transportation and Public Safety.
Okay.
Now, as someone who's spent years making sure Virginians can get from point A to point B without too many detours, we figured you'd appreciate a game that speaks your language. Okay. So we're going to play red light, yellow light, green light. Okay. All right, here's how it works. I'm going to throw out a big issue from this year's legislative session, and you just tell us whether it's full speed ahead, which would be a green light, something we should slow down and reconsider, would be a yellow light, or if it's time to hit the brakes and stop entirely, we'll call that one a red light. All right? So don't worry, we won't interrupt you either with any surprise speed camera tickets. So
Okay.
I think I'm the one who talks too fast, but at any rate, let's start with our first topic, a casino in Fairfax County.
Absolute red light that it stopped.
Okay.
Over, done, and it never had economic sense. And again, from my tax point of view, I could go into a number of questions. Never were appropriately addressed. Wrong place for it.
Wrong place, wrong time, wrong idea.
Absolutely.
All right, that's a red light then. All right, so data centers. Are we at green light, go ahead and build them? Yellow light, proceed with caution, or red light, do we just stop and bring them all together? What do we do?
Yellow light, lot of work to be done. Because, first of all, they represent a tremendous need worldwide. We're not going to turn back on the technology that is driving the need for the data centers. But the concentration of them, the environmental impact, the tremendous energy draw that has now been significantly exacerbated by AI, which takes 10 times the amount of energy, there is an incredible amount of work that has to be done to responsibly move forward with data centers.
Yeah, it's funny. That's something J. Lark studied that, and there was a national story on Planet Money. Before I came here on NPR, they were talking about Virginia and the energy resource, hungry nature of these data centers. All right, third topic, gray machine. Well, it depends on your name. Either skill games or gray machines. They're called both things. Will they finally get the green light, or is there going to be a red light coming for them, or where are we with that?
So this was one of my concerns about casinos. Casinos are justified if you can bring a lot of money in from outside that wouldn't be there anyway. When we're talking about gray machines, I get a big gulp refill at 7-Eleven at least 3-4 times a week, years and years and years. So I'm in and out, seeing people play the lottery and put down the $40, $60, $80. I see them now over at the machines over in the corner. And these are the very people that we should not be looking for revenue from. They shouldn't be spending that kind of money, and yet they're being promoted as revenue. No, there's much better, fairer ways to raise revenue, and it's a terrible idea. And then, of course, you have the very real situation of addiction to gambling, and that's what they're all about, besides the fact that these gray machines have a much lower payout than your typical casino does. They're very hard to regulate.
I think it's because it's two of your sweet spots, right? Which is tax policy. It's a very regressive sort of tax on the poor
and mental
health, right?
Yeah.
So there we are. All right, this is another one of your favorite topics. I know you've been talking about this for a long time. Noisy mufflers. I think you call them macho mufflers,
I
right?
do. I have my notebook.
Red light, yellow light, green light. What are we doing about
Fantastic. First of all, I love you, David Bulova. Delegate David Bulova took the bill, and also because of the very serious situation that happened in Fairfax when a law enforcement officer's car was surrounded and pounded on, and he had film of this, and it was very dangerous. So we were able to make very significant progress on a reckless driving aspect rather than on the noise level and decibel. There we still haven't done that, but by dealing with the reckless driving aspects and all the wheelies, you're dealing then with these meetups, the loud noises in the middle of the night, the very unsafe behavior, and from all of the work that I did on it, I am extremely grateful that it applies to private property open to the public. Translation? Shopping centers and warehouse parking lots and church parking lots where these meetups were occurring in the middle of the night. And because of what I've just described, very often they were close to residential, making it even worse from the noise point of view. So we scrub that a lot. I also chair a criminal law subcommittee to try to get all these definitions enforceable, and I believe we've done some good work.
Yeah, I don't know if our viewers know this, but you and I are the two subcommittee chairs on Courts of Justice. Courts of Justice is the busiest committee in the General Assembly, tackling some of the heaviest issues. I get the relatively easy job of being the civil law subcommittee chairman. You got the tough job of being the criminal law sub chair.
Because every word has to be right. You don't want to create the loophole, nor do you want to swoop up somebody who really isn't doing an
That's right. Well, speaking of getting the words right, that goes to my next red light, green light, red light, yellow. Anyway, you get the idea. Traffic light question, right? So this one seems like
I've chosen one of each.
Well, this one sounds like it should be a really obvious one, but as you'll talk about probably, there's more to meet the eye on this. But I introduced a bill this year to expand Virginia's anti-swastika law that makes it illegal to place swastikas. Green light, yellow light, red light?
I'm going to say a constant green light in this, a constant green yellow light, meaning it's always an issue. Let me go way back in the history that you brought up. When I was cabinet secretary for Jerry Beliles, Governor Beliles has only one thing in his official portrait in the halls of the General Assembly, and that's the world globe. That Virginia had to go out and be part of the world. He was talking mostly the economy and all of the marketing, but I remember so specifically he was saying, geography can't be just where is Egypt. It's got to be understanding the culture of Egypt and Bangladesh and Peru and on and on and on, so that when we try to work internationally, we have an understanding. Well, whether it's swastika, whether it's machetes, whether it's other symbols that we don't understand the generational, long heritage behind those symbols, it hurts us all. So it's a constant challenge that we must meet to be understanding of the various ways that cultures come together.
Yeah, because I think what happened during this session is we found that there are some cultures where they look at a swastika differently. They define it differently. They don't see the same image that the Nazis used. They have a holy symbol that's specific to their religion.
Well, I was helped on that, and I'm sorry to digress, but I did a bill for brandishing a machete, which was sort of a territorial and part of the gang issues that we were dealing with so intensely a good 10 years ago. And a rural legislator came to me and he says, I heard you explain this. What you're really talking about is like burning a cross in someone's yard. It's for intimidation. So that symbols, if you will, across cultures, just as you found in your swastika bill, it's how it is used, not the symbol per se.
Yeah, the intent piece is really important when we start to regulate those things. All right, let's keep going. Red light, green light, yellow light on rural electrical vehicle infrastructure. Where should we be going with that?
You got to spread it. It's got to be as ubiquitous, how's that for a good word, as a gas station is, because you've got to have the comfort level that I can travel. And Virginia's tourism is a major part of our economy, and there's a lot of great places to visit, but you've got to be sure as you go into Appalachia or out on the Eastern Shore that your vehicle is going to be able to make the journey.
Yeah, I'm smiling because your answer reminds me of I think one of the funnier moments in session when there was a legislator on the last day who was reading a speech that clearly someone had prepared for him, because he got to a word and said, lambasting. What kind of word is that? You remember that?
Right.
All right, speed cameras in crosswalks.
Yeah, we have really increased in pedestrian fatalities. Now, some of that is just walking along looking at your cell phone, not being aware, and or having buds in your ears. You're not even hearing the vehicles approach. So that we've got to do sort of all of the above to try to get the attention that these sidewalks are a meaningful part of people being able to safely move.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember, to be honest with you. Whether we had a bill to expand them to crosswalks. I don't think it passed. I think most of this we're sort of stuck with them in elementary school areas, but we haven't really. There were some efforts to expand it, and I don't think they've got over the finish line.
And there's a whole lot of problems with enforcement and making sure that your cameras are properly placed so that the actual vehicle, but also there's a big concern to make sure that we don't have private companies that are making use of this as a revenue raiser. advisor, and law enforcement should never be for revenue raising.
That's right, exactly. Yep. Cell phones in schools. Green light, red light, yellow light.
A lot of work to be done. Again,
That sounds like a
because
yellow light
I'm
then.
using that word again because it's so ubiquitous. Everybody has a cell phone. And so how do you make sure of safe storage? How do you make sure that they're accessible at the right point? How do you make sure, and I've seen you do this, I still will go to the screen and look something up in the code, but I've seen you use your cell phone to look up something in the code because you want that immediate information. And isn't it great that that information is now immediately available? But it comes at a price, and the price is, just as in pedestrian crosswalks, the distraction factor in the classroom. Are you paying attention to what the lesson is supposed to be developing, or are you just tuning in and out? And that presents a real problem in our education.
All right, we have 2.5 minutes to go. Let's go to a couple more questions. All right, you may or may not have a strong opinion about this issue, but I carried a bill this year that would have allowed ear piercing with a needle instead of a gun. Do you have any green light, yellow light, red light? No idea.
I'll ask my granddaughters about that. I have no idea.
All right. Another one that seems like it should be an easy answer, but not always the case. Laura Jane Cohen, one of our colleagues from Fairfax, introduced a bill to make all playgrounds accessible, handicap accessible. What do you think about accessible playgrounds?
Well, in the many places where my district has been over the years as I have been moved around, I represented an area of Franconia that has an absolutely wonderful accessible playground. All kinds of great features to enjoy. So that needs to be accessible. Whether you can put that kind of investment into all playgrounds is really the issue. But we definitely need to have more than just a few so that everyone has the experience of being the kid.
You know, it's funny, I voted against that bill for a very pedantic reason. I don't like adding lists to the code, right? I think if there should be accessible public facilities, then all public facilities should be accessible. If we put playground, what if something else isn't made accessible? And it became a big story. It's all over the place. One of like these three interesting bills. So I'm quoted all over the Commonwealth as hating accessible playgrounds.
Yeah, but
which isn't really the case.
Yeah,
it's
we're on the criminal. Yeah, as soon as you start that list, well, if you start the list, well, why didn't you include this and why didn't you include that, rather than saying public facilities?
And of course, the court says they didn't make a mistake. They must have had a reason. All right, less than 1 minute to go. Regulating addictive social media feeds. Speaking of me and my social media feed, what do you think? Red light, yellow light, green
Extremely
light.
difficult. Again, extraordinary. And I've dealt with any number of bills going back at least a decade or more on this, trying to deal with access. And how do you separate out a 14-year-old buying a birthday present for his mother?
Yeah. Well,
and how else what he might then be tagged with, and the abuse then starts on the social media. It's one that also is going to take some serious federal involvement.
Well, listen, thank you for playing our game today. I think it was a lot of fun. It went quickly. I mean, make the segment go just like that because you only have like 15 seconds to go. But Vivian Watts, who represents the Annandale, Franconia areas here in Fairfax County.
Bryn Mawr, not Franconia.
Bryn Mawr. All right, she got it right. Anyway, longest serving member of the Virginia House of Delegates here in the Fairfax area. I'll be back with Saddam Salim in about 2 minutes. See you then.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a crick in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. Better than ones get on. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
And welcome back to the Inside Scoop with this first episode after the end of the 2025 Virginia General Assembly session. We were just with Delegate Vivian Watts, the longest serving member of the Fairfax delegation, our dean. I'm joined by State Senator Saddam Salim. Saddam is one of the newest members of the Fairfax delegation, having just been elected in 2023. So he just finished up his second full session in Richmond. And Saddam, we're glad to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. So tell your district. I know your district pretty well. It's the 37th. We share the Falls Church area.
Yeah.
But you also go west, taking the town of Vienna and all the way out to Fairfax. Is that right?
Yep. So I do all the way out to Fairfax, the cities of Fairfax, and then I go all the way up to Tyson's as well, and parts of Central Fairfax.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty cool district. You got Tyson's Corner, the city of Fairfax. You got towns. You got the little city of Falls Church. So you got a little bit of everything. Really, the heart of Fairfax County, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so let's dive into the session, right? 2025, your second session. What do you feel like your biggest accomplishment was?
I think this year my biggest accomplishment was the invasive species plan.
Oh yeah.
And this was the one where we worked it out with the governor's office to see what he would prefer second time around, and I think we got a good bipartisan support on it, and we're hoping that he'll eventually sign it. And it really took a lot. Prior to session, we had to come up with a difference.
Well, tell us about your bill from last year that the governor vetoed.
So last year we had it where retail stores had to go and put up a sign. It would have a QR code, and then you would go on it. You would see all the list of invasive species and plants. And the Department of Agriculture would be the one that was in charge of keeping that list. However, the governor vetoed it, saying there are scientific names and then there are street names, and he had a difference of which agency controls that.
Okay.
His main point was that it's not something that he can directly control. So we went back this session and said, what do you need from us? Can we work out the list with you? So what we did was this year we worked out the list of at least 30 invasive plants with the governor's folks and other folks within the Department of Agriculture as well, and came to that conclusion. They have full control of that list, and we're going to start with 30, and then in the future we'll increase that.
Gotcha. I mean, it's not an insignificant problem. I mean, it sounds like invasive plants.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? But I mean, it's destroying a lot of our forests. I mean, I have woods behind my house. I see English ivy climbing up these trees, and then after a year or two, they just die. They fall over.
No, a lot of localities, when you look at Loudoun County to Fairfax County, on an average, they spend about $9 million on a year just removing invasive species, including some of our farmers out in Southwest Virginia and further out of this area, where they're spending millions of dollars just on pesticide.
Gotcha. All right, so congratulations on getting that bill across the finish line and turning a defeat into a failure into success. But what's your biggest issue? Would you say you have is there a particular issue that you'd like to champion in the General Assembly?
So I every year, and it grows, is my housing issues. I am trying to deregulate some of the permit process, some of the sort of red tape, if we can call it that, with localities and with the state side. And this year was the accessory dwelling unit that I also had last year. But this year I sort of gave up a majority of it to go with the Housing Commission's recommendation. And I think there was a need for some success, and we got there, but there was also a lot that we had to give up. And that is the thing that I learned as the youngest member in the Senate right now is when you want to get things done, you have to give up a lot in order to gain something, and you have to work off of that going forward.
Yeah, there's a saying that politics is the art of the possible, right? And it's easy to come in and say, look, this is the best bill. I've talked to the advocates. They tell me this is the gold standard. Let's go for the gold standard. Sometimes you got to settle for bronze.
Yep,
right?
exactly.
Well, speaking of that, so why is the advice? Have you gotten any, I'm sure you have folks that want to help you, mentor you, tell you things. Is there a particular piece of advice or guidance you received this session that sort of stands out for you?
I did this year from Senator Deeds. So he would always come into caucus and he would say, once your bills are published, it's no longer your bill. Whatever happens to the bill, it happens. Every member of the General Assembly gets a say in it now. If they want to change it, they're going to change it, whether you like it or not. The goal is you got to accept that as early as possible, and once you do, it gets a lot easier. So I started accepting that the moment he told me that at the beginning of session, and every bill that I had where somebody wanted to make a change, I went along with it, I also provided additional feedback, asked the right questions why those changes, and really understood why some of the changes were needed. It became a lot easier to understand. I may see it from one perspective, but there's 51 on my side on the House side, and then 20 on the Senate side. They see about 71 different perspectives, and I have to be okay with some of those perspectives.
I think that's really good advice. And in fact, it's funny. When after it goes through the committee, frequently it's got to change, and it becomes the committee substitute, right? Yeah. And now it's the committee's bill. It's not your bill, but you're sort of carrying it through. That's not just like a funky way of keeping track of things. That really tells you sort of about ownership of the bill. Very good. So what about your caucus as a Senate Democratic caucus? I know that you guys have been sort of prided yourselves during the administration for being the brick wall against things when you were by yourselves. But anything you guys have done sort of on the positive side to sort of push things forward here?
Yeah, so I think this is something that a lot of folks don't see it as a big issue, or it hasn't gotten that much attention, as the collective bargaining bill that we passed last day of session. And a lot of it was really, when you look at it, a lot of the other bills got conformed into it. JCF had a piece, other senators had a piece.
Jennifer Carroll Foy.
Jennifer Carroll Foy. So everyone had a little piece in it, and all 21 of us signed on to the Scott Serval bill for public employees collective bargaining bill. And that was a success that, we debated this for hours on end on the floor, back and forth. It even went to conference where we couldn't come to an agreement between the two chambers, and at the end, it felt like the 11th hour we came to an agreement, and I think that was collectively, we all said there's parts of it, not all of us are going to agree on it, but we're going to go and stick with what our leaders want, what the community wants.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things to do, particularly when it's within your own party, right? Because I know Kathleen Tran on the House side was working on that bill. And it's one thing to just sort of pound your fist and say it's my way, but at the end of the day, I think Scott Serval put it to me one day during session. We were all getting mad at each other. He's like, we all have nuclear weapons, right? We can all kill each other's bills.
Exactly.
That doesn't really help us. That doesn't get us forward. But you have to figure out what where the lines are, and what you can do to move forward. Yeah. So yeah, that's actually that's a bill that didn't get a whole lot of conversation, but it's really significant. I mean, we're going to start to see some of our public safety employees be able to collectively bargain. We even give police and sheriff's offices some collective bargaining power.
Exactly.
But we're leaving the discipline piece of it, I guess, out for the out of the union hands. I think that's the piece that scares some folks.
Exactly.
All right, what about the biggest miss? Is there a bill that you think we really missed the vote on?
So I think, Senator Hashmi had a specific bill related to creating sort of a council to sort of look at alternative therapy methods for veteran suicide, to create a council basically, and unanimously got out of the Senate. And we're thinking, this is something that's going to help out the veteran community, and I think it just slipped through the cracks when it over to the House, and that was probably one of our biggest misses. I think that's something the governor would have signed, and I'm going blank on the specifics of that bill. But
I'm not sure why it didn't pass. It didn't come before me, but that's why
we
missed it. Right?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I think Senator Hashmi didn't realize until the last day, like, wait a minute, my bill, it's there, but it hasn't gotten docketed. But those are the things. In a short session, this is what happens: is that
so just run out of time.
When you have 15 or 20 bills in a short session, you have to really pay attention to every single one of those bills.
Yeah, well, so we've got a Republican governor who's got to sign all these bills, right? Yeah. So is there any kind of bipartisan? So I know in the Senate you guys actually are less partisan, I think, than in the House side. On the House side, we don't let the Republicans talk much or do much, but you guys are much more bipartisan on the Senate side. Is there a particular bipartisan piece of legislation? You talked about this veterans one as something that could have been. Were there any other sort of bipartisan moments that stick out in your head from the session?
I think there's, the last day of session we saw the APCO rate sort of reduction of the ratepayers rate control bill. I think that's the one where even on our end, we had to come together as Republicans and Democrats. Same thing on the House side. I think that's one where Republicans were so up in arms about it because it impacts a lot of their rural area where APCO is the primary supplier for them. I think that's the one that goes to the governor's desk. He's going to have a tough time deciding what he wants to do. I'm leaning towards he's going to sign it, but then again, I honestly don't know. There's a lot of times where I thought the governor was going to sign a lot of things, and it comes back, and I'm going, what was he thinking?
Yeah, there's some bills to get out there 99 to nothing and 40 to nothing in your chamber, and the governor has his own look at them. So this bill would have helped control some of the rate increases we've been seeing in Southwest Virginia?
Correct. And it leads to a lot of other things that Senator Hackworth and Bill Stanley were working on. This is just a small piece that they're getting. And of course, Senator Bill Stanley talks about we're actually helping out Grandma Thelma. That was a whole segment of like 5 minutes of conversation about a 90-year-old woman in Southwest Virginia really getting the help that she needs so that she doesn't have to pay $100 on her electricity bill.
All right, so that was a good coming together moment.
It was.
What sticks out as maybe something that was more controversial? What was, I have an idea about what it might be. What really got everybody divided? What was something you guys just couldn't get along on?
I'm going to say the obvious thing. I think it was the license plate reader bill. Not only did it have us divided, it had the other side divided as well. There was a method to doing this bill. It had a lot of different components. I mean, sunset clause, from data privacy to what really goes on. And it really showcases how the General Assembly is very different. You got members from rural Virginia who are all for it because they got miles and miles of highways where they don't have the law enforcement capability, so they're thinking this could help them out. But then you got Northern Virginia who's like, we have the capability, we don't think we need this. And then you got some folks that are saying, hey, we do need this is already done, but we don't regulate it. So I think there was a lot of controversy around that.
That was certainly one of the more controversial bills, and again, it also could be your most bipartisan in that, like you said, there were people supporting it, both Republicans and Democrats, and then you also had opponents that were also both Republicans and Democrats for different reasons. You had some very libertarian Republicans who don't like any of the monitoring. You also had some members of the Black Caucus who said, no, these things contribute to over policing of some of our neighborhoods. So I agree with you. I hadn't thought about that one. I had left it off, so that's why we have guests to ask good questions to. Anything that surprised you? We got about 1 minute left. Was there anything that surprised you? I know it's the second year around, maybe things are easier, but what was new or different this time?
This time it was really, I got to utilize DLS and legislative services a lot more. I really learned you got to go in person and talk to some of the folks if you really need certain things done. One of the other surprising thing is that we got a new LIS system, and it threw a lot of my co-signatures, a lot of the other thing off, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that.
Yeah, there was a new technology, an LIS upgrade, but wow, we lost a lot of functionality. Some of it's getting to learn how to use it as well. So listen, thank you very much for being with us. So you saw, I don't know if you saw earlier, you weren't watching, but we got a game show that we're going to play with you. We're going to talk about your favorite issue, the casino. And the game that we're going to use for you is going to be bet, hold, or fold, right? So I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to tell me whether you bet on it, whether you hold on that, or whether you fold with that hand. So we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, I'm Josh Temple. You might have seen me on TV where I help folks turn their houses into dream homes. But forget construction. Parenting is the toughest job there is. So when you need help or advice, turn to the parenting experts at Boys Town.
I was afraid of that.
Well, guess it's time to get you fixed.
Your pets will start fooling around sooner than you think.
Go on, get out of here!
Accidental litters lead to millions killed in shelters each year. Help prevent more. Fix at month 4.
Food. It nourishes, brings us together, and adds flavor to life. That's why it's important to wash hands, surfaces, and fresh produce. Keep raw meat, poultry, and seafood separate from ready-to-eat foods like fruits and vegetables. And cook to proper temperatures using a food thermometer. Enjoy, and refrigerate leftovers within 2 hours. For more tips on safely preparing foods, visit homefoodssafety.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to our fourth and final segment of this week's edition of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Marcus Simon. I'm joined today by Senator Saddam Salim from the 37th District, which is Central Fairfax County, meaning I say Central Fairfax City, Tyson's Corner, Town of Vienna, and my beloved city of Falls Church. So welcome back, Saddam.
Thank you.
All right, so I said earlier, you saw our game show segment with Vivian. Now it's your turn. We know you spent more time fighting the Fairfax casino proposal than most people actually spend inside a casino. So in honor of your tireless efforts to shut it all down, we thought we'd have a little fun and make you play a game we like to call Bet, Hold, or Fold. All right, it's pretty simple. I'll throw out a hot topic from this year's legislative session. You tell me whether you're all in and placing your bet, keeping your chips on the table and holding, or whether you're cutting your losses and folding. All right, and we promise this game is completely skill-based. No gray machines involved, no chance, leaving nothing to chance. All right, so first, the casino itself, a casino in Fairfax County. Yep. Are you betting on that? Are you holding on that? Or are you folding on that?
I'm going to hold on that, and there's a specific reason. It's going to come back again. I just don't know who's going to bring it back. Given the economic issues around Fairfax County, I think people are going to still try to convince. You saw, last year it was Marsden. This year's Majority Leader Scott Serval. I just don't know who's going to bring it back.
So you're holding on to it, but you're holding your fire because you think
you're
going to need
I'm holding. Exactly.
Right. Data centers, right? That's been another big topic from this session. Are you a bet on data centers? Are you a hold on data centers? Or you a fold on the data centers?
I'm a bet on data centers. Right. I would like to see a lot of our developments, but I like to see it in a methodical way while we focus on environment. We got to be able to tie the revenues back to housing, back to funding our public schools.
Gotcha. All right. Talk to this a little bit. Gray machines, skill games. Are you a not buy, sell, or hold? It's a bet, hold, or fold on skill games.
I'm going to hold.
Okay.
I think what's going to end up happening is that we're going to continue to fight this fight. It all depends on who's going to be governor. Last year we came to an agreement, but it just made it to the governor's desk and it was never signed. There were some parts he didn't like, so it's all going to depend on is it Spamberger or is it Winsome, whoever comes in. Depending on who it is, I see this coming back.
Right, so we'll have to have a decision to be made. I mean, it's an interesting topic. There are a lot of detractors to it, but I think that one side of it that some people don't see are the small businesses that have sort of come to rely on that as a draw to get people into their businesses. And you can buy so much stuff online. You can have, use Instacart to have groceries and things delivered to your door. So what brings people into the convenience store and gets them spending their money there? So it's not as easy as it sounds because there's a lot of people that depend on that. All right. This was maybe a Vivian question, but I'm going to give it to you and see if you have any opinions on noisy mufflers or loud mufflers.
I'm going to bet on that. I think, I saw Delegate Bulova bring that up. I saw a different noise issue that another delegate brought up. I think we're going to continue to see this with the way a lot of the folks that are not only in this area but throughout the Commonwealth, they're sort of customizing their vehicles and they want to be out in open roads. And I got a larger, more than 4-lane roads, a lot of them are in my district. That is the main reason why I'm going to bet on this, that we're going to get some regulation around this.
So you're a bet on regulating the module mufflers.
To be clear, I'm betting that we're going to regulate it, given that a lot of the roads that are more than 4 lanes happen to be in my district, from Fairfax City into Tyson's, and the famous video that made it to X, or formerly known as Twitter, was actually where the site of the casino was going to be, right next to it.
That's right. That's your district, right?
Yep.
All right. So bet on it, hold on it, fold on it. Expanding Virginia's anti-swastika law. So Virginia's already got a law that makes it a felony to display a swastika on churches and schools, on highways. in an effort to intimidate or coerce or harass a person. We've expanded that to private property, but that raised some other issues when we did that. So where are you on that issue?
I think we're gonna do something about it. I'm going all in with it. I think the concept of what the swastika is to a lot of different communities versus what it was to a specific community that has gone through so much. It shouldn't be another reminder that, hey, this tragedy, this sort of thing that happened to you all, we need to do something about it. And I think given that we have a lot of different diverse background within the General Assembly, they're all going to come together and say at the end of the day, if they're attacking you and it's a symbol that is sacred to us in a religious way, we are going to work together, find that median so that we can also support your community as well.
Yep. And so it's interesting. It was an interesting bill because, like I said, this is one of those things I had no idea until I started to hear from members of the Hindu and Jain and other communities that the word swastika means something much different to them.
Yeah.
So we had to be more precise in our language.
Yeah, and the thing is, I learned is that there's a different way to draw it out depending on which religion it's in.
Right.
And completely means different. But to you and I, who are just walking and see it in a building, we can't tell the difference, or we see a graffiti, we just think of it as this is something hateful against another community.
Yep. All right, so rural EV infrastructure, expanding EV infrastructure into the wild. All these folks, they drive big trucks anyway, they don't even drive electric cars, so we really need to be expanding EV infrastructure all over Virginia?
We do. Here's why. So
you're betting on this?
I'm betting on the expansion. So I have two senators who are in rural Virginia. You got D-Stuff and you got the newest Senator Cipher, who both drive EV vehicles, and they're in the most rural part, specifically Cipher, of his district, along with some of our Republican colleagues, and I think there's a need for it. Sure, they can charge at home, but there's definitely a need. I drove out to Redville, Virginia, a while ago, and as soon as I got there, I was like, I got less than 40 miles on my vehicle. I don't know if I'm going to make it back. I get to a station, and two of the charging stations are broken. So I'm stuck with like one and waiting for the other one to be freed up. So I think there is a need. It's not just, Northern Virginia or, Richmond. It's throughout the Commonwealth. When we look at a lot of our golf course, when we look at a lot of our resorts, there's a much need for that because folks from here are going out there.
Yeah, I remember going back and forth in my Audi e-tron to drop my son off at Blacksburg and then get back. And I was having a compatibility problem. Like my car and the EV charger wouldn't talk to each other for a minute. And I looked on my phone for the next one, and it was further than my range. I would have had to go backwards to get to something, and hopefully we would have made it. But good news is I plugged in for the third time, and it worked. And we started talking to each other. All right, bet, hold, or fold on Virginia's 3 constitutional amendments. We've got 3 constitutional amendments to protect freedom, reproductive freedom, protect the right to marry, and protect the right to vote. Where are you on those 3 constitutional amendments?
I'm betting I'm going all in. I'm putting all my chips in all 3 of those. It's phenomenal what we've been doing with the federal side, taking away a lot of the rights, repealing a lot of the laws that were laws and opinions that were on the books for decades. It's our opportunity. If they really say, hey, it's the state's responsibility to decide what should happen when it comes to all of those issues, I'm going all in. I think we're going to get this through. I think, we're going to, as a result of the 3 constitutional amendments, we're going to get the House a larger majority than what they have right now so that we can come back and say, regardless of who's governor, we are going to put this through.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think these are winning issues for us. I agree with you 100%. Bet all in and borrow some money before I even go in. Give me some of that. All right, speed cameras. Speed cameras in crosswalks, and specifically this session was the bill. Where are you on that? Are you a bet, hold, or fold?
I'm betting on that, and there's a specific reason. I represent part of Oakton, specifically Blake Lane, where we see accidents happening almost every other week, and we have actually had a lot of people die. From somebody who's crossing the road to folks in the vehicles. It has become an issue for that community and that precinct that we do have to do something. And I think, I know people don't like putting it on crosswalks, they don't like to put it on stop signs, but it is needed when it comes to public safety. Think of it as, if you're on the WNOD trail and you're, on your bike going 25 miles an hour at 7 p.m. and it's dark out, you want to see some type of flasher, which we put out right now, but you want the same thing for somebody who's walking across the street to be protected as well.
Yeah, one of those things, they're very frustrating every time you first time you get a photo ticket, because I didn't know it was there, but you know what happens when you drive that route again? You know the next time it's there, it does change people's behavior. And I think as long as it's used to change people's behavior, they can be really effective. If you start moving them around, so people don't know where they are, then it feels like more like a money trap, right, than changing people's behavior. All right, allowing ear piercing, I know, you may know why I'm asking this, allowing ear piercing with just a needle instead of the stud gun.
I'm gonna just hold and see what happens. I don't need to get it done. I don't know that many people that needs to get it done. If somebody wants to get their ears pierced, I think people will figure out a way to do it. So I'm just gonna hold, and I think if we make it safer, we do it in a way that makes sense for everyone. That's where I stand. I will support it if that's the case, but I'm going to hold for now.
All right. Well, it seems like a weird bill for me to carry, but it was one of those, in our short sessions, as I was discussing with Vivian, we have bill limits, and somebody came to me and they had a business in Tyson's that needed to have a special license for this kind of ear piercing, and I had a bill slot left. So I became an expert on, so I can tell you, piercing with the needle, technically safer and more sanitary, and requires more training. So anyway, I've got about 2 minutes to go. All right, bet, hold, or fold on accessible playgrounds.
I'm going to bet on it. I think Virginia has been leading in a lot of things. We always set the example for policies that other states look at. A lot of times we wait to see what other states do and say, look, you all failed, we're going to do it better. And this is one where I think we can lead. I know Delegate Cohen, I worked with her last session on some of the accessibility and disability bills related to college campuses and all that. So for her to carry this specific bill, I think she's trying to make sure that when you have kids that have a specific need or disability, they should not be excluded. We should be praising, saying, hey, look, we welcome everyone, and we have to, put those out there now and say, what we, preach and what we talk about, we're going to put them in action. And that is exactly what this is. So I'm going to bet on that.
You're doing a great job. We did about 1 minute per question. We're down to our last question with about a minute to go. So regulating addictive social media feeds. You bet, hold, or fold?
I'm going to bet on it. I saw what the bill turned out to be. I think when it comes to social media, before I got to the General Assembly, pornography and all that was sort of banned out of the state. And people were upset. I got an email when I was running for office, and I was like, that's not something I would support, but sure, I'll listen. I think we're in a similar situation where if we, put a placeholder, or if we limit the time, it's not going to make it or break it for these kids. It's going to give them the opportunity to go out, play with their friends, get on a different app, or go outside, do some other things, because social media has become addictive. We saw with TikTok and other social media. The rise of influencers have increased over the last 5 years. And we need to tell folks to do some real things, not just be on social media and become the next influencer. That's temporarily is what you're doing, and it's got lasting effects.
Yeah, thank you. This was great. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for playing the game.
Yeah, no, of course.
I appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.
I'm Marcus Simon with Saddam Salim. This has been your episode of The Inside Scoop. We're done.
Thank you.